You won't believe what happened the moment my foot touched that Lakeside shortcut. The sun had just begun to dip behind the trees, casting a warm golden glow across the still water of the lake. I had just wrapped up a long day at work and decided to walk home instead of driving. The shortcut beside the lake was quiet, beautiful, and honestly, it was the only moment of peace I had gotten all day. This wasn't just any shortcut, it was a scenic stretch that curved gently along the edge of the lake, shaded by tall willows and bordered with wildflowers. I had walked this path many times before, always enjoying the way the world seemed to slow down for just a bit. But that evening, everything changed in an instant. Just as I turned the corner and started down the gravel path, a sharp voice cracked through the calm like thunder. "Hey! Hey you! Stop right there!" I froze for a moment, confused. It wasn't the kind of tone someone uses for a casual hello. I turned around slowly and there she was. HOA Karen. Every neighborhood has one, but ours had her. Clipboard gripped like a weapon, sunglasses perched high on her head, and that classic expression that combined fake authority with pure entitlement. She marched toward me like she was storming a battlefield, eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You can't be here," she shouted, pointing dramatically at the path beneath my feet. "This is HOA property. Homeowners only." I blinked. "Ma'am, I am a homeowner. And this area, this exact trail, is part of the federal easement. It's legally accessible to residents." But she wasn't interested in facts. She wasn't hearing me. Instead, she stepped closer, squinting at me like she was trying to see a lie on my face. "That's not true. I've lived here for 15 years and served on the HOA board for 12. I know every square inch of this neighborhood, and you're not allowed back here." I tried again, calmly. "Actually, the land between the lake and the rear property lines belongs to the county and is part of a federally protected floodplain. It's open for easement access." She cut me off by pulling out her phone and tapping aggressively. "I'm calling 911. Right now. You're trespassing. And I'm not about to let someone like you get away with it." That phrase. "Someone like you." It hung in the air, heavy and ugly. I didn't flinch, didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But deep down, I was boiling. I had done nothing wrong, just walked a public access path near my own home, and suddenly I was being treated like a criminal. She turned her back to me and spoke loudly into the phone. "Yes, there's a man trespassing. He's walking behind our homes. I don't recognize him. He's acting suspicious, maybe dangerous. Please send someone quickly." I couldn't believe it. Dangerous? Suspicious? I was wearing khakis, sneakers, and holding a cloth grocery bag. I looked like I was heading to a farmer's market, not planning a heist. She was escalating the situation fast, and all I could do was stand there and wait. I didn't want to leave because that would look like I was guilty. But standing still while someone paints you as a threat? That's a helpless feeling I wouldn't wish on anyone. She turned around and smirked, clearly satisfied with her performance. "You're going to learn your lesson today," she said smugly. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my wallet and checked my ID, just in case I needed it. What Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a registered federal contractor. Part of my work required me to have clearance and ID for access to certain regulated zones, including this very easement. I had paperwork, digital records, and a federal badge that carried more legal weight than her entire clipboard collection. I stood tall, not moving a step, as the distant sound of sirens began to rise in the background. She wasn't bluffing. Cops were on the way, and soon this would either turn into a misunderstanding, or a complete mess. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she had just won the lottery. She folded her arms, chin high, like a sheriff guarding the town from bandits. But I didn't back down. I wasn't going to let her intimidate me on land I had every right to be on. I had the law on my side. The question was, would the officers see it that way? Or would Karen's hysterics turn a peaceful walk into a night in handcuffs? I could have laughed, if it wasn't so absurd. I stood there watching her continue pacing in circles near the edge of the lake like she was guarding a national treasure, but to her, that little path was sacred HOA ground. What made it worse was how confident she was, like she truly believed the moment the police arrived, I'd be in handcuffs and dragged off for daring to step foot on a gravel trail. But what she didn't know, and what made this whole thing so ironic, is that I probably had more legal clearance to walk that path than she did. That Lakeside shortcut ran right through a flood easement zone, which by federal law was open to public utility inspection and resident foot access. The HOA might control a lot of things in our neighborhood, paint colors, mailbox sizes, even the kinds of flowers allowed in front lawns, but they didn't control the land next to the water. That space was managed by the county under federal regulations. Still, she wasn't listening. She was pacing, muttering things like, "These people just think they can do whatever they want," and glancing over at me with eyes that burned with suspicion and misplaced power. I tried again, calmly. "Look, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but this path is part of a public easement. The HOA can't restrict access to it." She turned sharply. "Don't lecture me. I've sat through more HOA meetings than you've had hot dinners. I wrote the bylaws, for heaven's sake. You think you know better than me?" Before I could respond, she raised her voice even louder, for the benefit of anyone who might be listening. "You're trespassing and refusing to leave. That's obstruction. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges myself." That's when I noticed a few neighbors peeking from their backyards and windows. Most of them knew me, at least by face. I had lived in the neighborhood for 5 years. Never caused trouble. Always waved hello. Paid my dues like everyone else. But Karen? She was infamous. Everyone had a story. One guy had once been fined for having a flower pot that didn't match the approved color scheme. Another woman got a violation notice for leaving her recycling bin out 15 minutes past pickup. Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she enjoyed it. It gave her a sense of control, and in her world, control was everything. The sound of sirens grew louder. I could see the reflection of red and blue lights bouncing off the windows across the lake. She clapped her hands together as if welcoming guests to a party. "Finally. Maybe now you'll learn there are rules here. You can't just do whatever you want." I stayed calm. Pulled my federal ID from my wallet and held it in my hand. It wasn't something I flaunted, just a piece of plastic with my photo, badge number, clearance code, and federal agency credentials. Most people would never recognize it for what it was, but to a trained officer, it said everything they needed to know. The police SUV pulled up to the far end of the gravel path and rolled slowly toward us. 2 officers stepped out. One was tall and older, with salt and pepper hair. The other was younger, maybe fresh out of the academy. They didn't rush or draw weapons, which was a relief. Karen immediately walked up to them, hands flailing like she was directing traffic. "That's him. That's the man I was telling you about. He was sneaking around behind the houses. He refused to leave when I told him it was private property." The older officer raised a hand calmly. "Ma'am, we'll speak with him." "Thank you." Then they turned to me. The older one stepped forward. "Good evening, sir. Can I see some identification, please?" I handed over my driver's license and my federal contractor ID. He took both, studied them, and gave a small nod. "You're with the Department of Environmental Operations?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Correct. I'm registered under the Clean Water Easement Access provisions. This path is within that zone." The officer looked back toward the younger cop and gave a brief nod. Then he walked a few steps away and made a call, most likely verifying my ID with dispatch. Karen was still standing there, arms crossed, lips tight like she was waiting for applause. "He's trying to lie his way out of it," she said loudly. "But I've dealt with people like him before." The younger officer walked up beside me and spoke gently. "Do you live nearby, sir?" I pointed toward the hill just beyond the row of trees. "2 streets over." I was cutting through on my way back from the store. The older officer returned a moment later. "Everything checks out. He's clear. He's registered. And this path is in the public access zone. There's no violation." Karen's face fell so fast it was like watching a balloon deflate. "What? No. No, you don't understand. This is HOA property. I have the maps. I have the documents." The officer stopped her with a calm but firm voice. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the GIS data and the county property maps. This area isn't under HOA jurisdiction. It's protected federal easement. Residents have the right to walk through here. What you reported was not a crime." Her voice shook a little. "But he didn't tell me that. He didn't say anything. I couldn't help but speak then. You didn't give me the chance. You were too busy threatening me and dialing 911. The officer turned back to her. "We'll let you off with a verbal warning this time, but please understand, misusing emergency services, especially when no crime has occurred, is a serious matter. If it happens again, it may result in charges." Karen looked stunned. She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Then, suddenly aware of the neighbors still watching from behind their fences and windows, she turned around and stormed off, muttering something about ridiculous rules and overstepping government. The officers nodded at me. "You're good to go, sir. Sorry about the trouble." "Thank you," I said, slipping my ID back into my wallet. And just like that, the entire scene deflated. The drama, the accusation, the power play, it all collapsed the moment reality stepped in. The patrol car hadn't even fully rolled away before Karen started pacing again, though this time it wasn't with confidence, it was with confusion and embarrassment. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say something to regain control, but nothing came out. The neighbors who had come out to watch the commotion didn't bother hiding their curiosity now. Some were pretending to water their lawns or adjust their porch lights, but their eyes were fixed on us. A couple even whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Everyone knew her reputation, and now they were watching it crumble in real time. I took a deep breath, letting the tension leave my shoulders. The lake rippled gently beside me, completely unbothered by the storm that had just taken place on its edge. I glanced at the spot where Karen had stood earlier, waving the officers down like she was summoning a cavalry. She wasn't standing so tall anymore. She looked defeated. I started walking again, this time more slowly, almost deliberately. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted to take my time, breathe in the moment, and enjoy the victory, not because I had done something extraordinary, but because I had stayed calm and let the truth speak for itself. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, each step a quiet reminder that this path belonged to all of us, not just the ones who yelled the loudest. As I walked past the line of fences that separated the private backyards from the public access zone, a voice called out. "Hey! That was wild," a man said. It was Jared, a neighbor from a few houses down. We'd spoken a few times before at the community barbecues, mostly about sports and lawn care. "She really called the cops on you?" "Yeah," I said with a small laugh, "because I walked the path we've all used for years." He shook his head in disbelief. "Unreal. She once fined me $75 because my trash bin was out an hour early. I swear she watches the whole street with binoculars." "Sounds about right," I replied. "But she picked the wrong battle today." He chuckled. "I've never seen her look like that. Like someone unplugged her." I continued on my way, a few other neighbors waving or offering supportive glances as I passed. The mood had shifted. Karen might have spent years building her image as the all-powerful HOA queen, but now people had seen the truth. She overreached. She made a scene. And she was wrong. The shortcut curved around the next bend, dipping slightly where a small stream fed into the lake. I stopped there for a moment and looked back. Karen was gone. The patrol car was gone. Just the sound of frogs and cicadas now. Peace, at last. The federal ID in my wallet suddenly felt heavier than usual, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. It wasn't about superiority. It wasn't about pulling rank. It was about having facts, law, and calmness on your side in the face of irrational hostility. I never liked to show it unless I had to, but this time, it made the difference between being treated like a trespasser and being respected as a law-abiding citizen. And what made it all the more powerful was how unnecessary the whole confrontation had been. If Karen had just stopped for a second and listened, really listened, we could have avoided the entire scene. But people like her don't operate on facts. They operate on control, appearances, and fear. Later that evening, I sat on my back patio with a cold drink in hand, replaying the moment in my mind. I imagined what might have happened if I didn't have the ID. If I hadn't known my rights. If I had been someone younger, someone less confident, someone who might have panicked. What would the police have done then? What story would have made it into the HOA newsletter? My phone buzzed with a message from a neighbor, heard about what happened. Good for you for standing your ground. About time someone put her in her place. Another followed. Then another. People were starting to speak up, little by little. It wasn't just about me and Karen anymore. It was about years of quiet frustration that people had felt but never acted on. Maybe this incident was the spark. Maybe the control she'd held over the neighborhood through threats and fear was finally slipping. The next day, I received an email from the county zoning department. Apparently, someone, probably Karen, had filed a complaint about improper land use near the lake. But after reviewing property records and easement boundaries, the county not only dismissed the complaint, they also issued a reminder to the HOA board about the legal access provisions. Attached was a PDF map, highlighted in bright yellow, clearly showing the easement path as publicly accessible. I couldn't help but smile. The law had spoken, and this time it wasn't in Karen's favor. That weekend, I noticed something even more surprising. For the first time in years, people were using the shortcut again. Families strolled with their kids, older couples walked hand in hand, and teens cut through to get to the park. It was like the neighborhood had taken a collective breath and realized the fence Karen built around everyone wasn't made of wood, it was made of fear. And now that fear had cracked. I passed her house once or twice that week. Her blinds stayed drawn. No more patrolling the sidewalks. No more pacing the yards with her clipboard. Just silence. Maybe she was waiting for the gossip to die down. Or maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that authority without understanding is just noise. And in the end, that's what this whole thing came down to. She tried to turn a peaceful walk into a criminal act. She tried to use her voice as a weapon. But facts are louder. Law is louder. And when you stand calmly in the storm, sometimes that's all it takes to silence the noise. By the time the weekend rolled around, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with whispers about the incident by the lake. What started as a routine shortcut walk for me had turned into a full-blown HOA scandal. I wasn't surprised. Things like this spread fast around here, especially when they involved Karen. Word of her misfire with the police had reached every block, and while no one said it directly to her face, the shift in energy was impossible to miss. The woman who once stormed the sidewalks like she ran the place was now hiding behind drawn curtains and tightly locked doors. I didn't see her walking the streets with her usual clipboard. No passive-aggressive sticky notes on people's mailboxes. No angry emails warning of violations. Just silence. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear the sighs of relief from every resident who had quietly endured her tyranny for years. I kept using the Lakeside shortcut, now more confidently than ever. And interestingly enough, I wasn't alone. On Monday morning, as I made my usual walk, I saw an elderly couple from Elm Street strolling the same path. The wife smiled at me and gave a tiny nod as we passed each other. On Tuesday, 2 kids on scooters zipped by, laughing and racing along the gravel. On Wednesday, a mom with a stroller took the path with her toddler babbling happily as they watched ducks by the shore. Every day, more and more neighbors returned to the shortcut, reclaiming the space that had been silently stolen by intimidation. People had always assumed it was off-limits because Karen made it feel that way. But now, the truth was out, and people weren't afraid anymore. Then came the real turning point. That Friday evening, I received a hand-delivered envelope in my mailbox. It was from the HOA board. For a moment, my stomach dropped. Part of me still expected the worst. Maybe some ridiculous accusation or notice that Karen was trying to get back at me through official channels. But when I opened it, I blinked in disbelief. It was an invitation. A formal request to attend a special emergency HOA meeting regarding community conduct, complaints, and board restructuring. The wording was careful and diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. Karen was in trouble. I attended the meeting the next evening. It was held in the clubhouse near the entrance of the neighborhood. Normally, HOA meetings were half-empty affairs, with only the same handful of people showing up to complain about barking dogs or overgrown lawns. But this one? Packed. Every seat was taken. People stood along the back wall. The air buzzed with energy, not anger, not exactly, but determination. The kind of mood that said, enough is enough. The board president, Mr. Latham, an older gentleman who usually let Karen do all the talking, stood up and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Tonight, we will be addressing several recent concerns that have come to our attention, including misuse of authority and